All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. And I want to welcome a special guest today, Crystal Washington. Crystal works with organizations that leverage technology to increase profits and productivity. She's known as the technology translator. Infusing humor, she shares only the practical applications of social media, apps, and the web. Crystal's clients comprise Fortune 500 companies, including Google, Microsoft, and GE. And as a sought after keynote speaker, she's educated and entertained audiences across North America, Africa, and Europe. She regularly appears on major television networks and in business publications for her expertise. She's the author of the books One Tech Action and The Social Media Why. And outside of technology, Crystal considers herself to be a travel fanatic and an afro-puff aficionado. So please join me in welcoming Crystal.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, of course. As I was saying when we were chatting before, one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation is so women can see other women who have made it in the speaking industry out there doing it, being successful. So do you want to tell us a bit about how you got started?
Oh, okay. So my background is in hospitality. So I started off in a sales and marketing role for a hospitality company. I was in charge of e-channels. And what happened was there's this little thing called social media that was really kind of new, and it was at its infancy. And I remember seeing this and thinking, wow, if companies ever start using this, companies are going to start to be able to build relationships with consumers. They'll actually be able to have conversations, which has never happened in history. And so, I went to my boss and I said, hey, this is going to be huge. Because again, companies weren't using it yet. Give me some time to explore this and figure out how we can leverage it. And he looked at me in my early 20s over a huge department of people that were old enough to be my parents and grandparents. And he said, look, kid, you're cute and you make us more money than anyone else has in your position. Stick to what you know. And I was like, huh, okay. So I quit my job 6 months later to start a digital marketing firm because I knew this was going to be big. And I started off with small companies because they're agile and I could, implement and we could experiment. And then I started attracting like big boys like Google and Microsoft and British Airways hired me to do some consulting. And so it started with that. And then my clients, because everyone's a member of professional organizations, would say, hey, Crystal, can you do me a favor? Speak at XYZ meeting. I would do it as a favor, but I started getting so many requests. And every time I spoke, it would lead to more requests that I remember thinking, I can't keep doing this. I'm not billing hours for this. And I remember the first organization, Melanie, I said, I'm so sorry. I can't, I don't have the time. They said, but we'll pay you. And I said, oh, and that was the beginning of my speaking career.
I love that organic growth through, the path that you had already kind of intuitively known would be successful. So tell me a bit about your journey from there. Like, obviously, do you still run your company in addition to speaking?
No. All the people that worked under me, nope. Now speaking is like 94% of my business revenue. I do very little consulting.
Okay. And when did you feel like it was right to make that transition?
So I met this wonderful woman named Karen McCullough, who is a professional speaker. She had been speaking for 10 years before I met her. And basically we ended up bonding over, I posted about her book that I liked, and we ended up becoming fast friends. And she looked at me and she said, I see you want to become a professional speaker. She said, I'm going to turn you into a professional speaker. And I was like, okay. And it started with her. But as I was on this journey, early on, she said, Crystal, you can't have two masters. I said, what do you mean? And she said, either you want to be a speaker or you want to be a consultant. If you really want to do speaking on the level that you're saying you want to, you can't spend all this time in consulting. And so I'm thinking, lady, you're crazy. This is how I'm paying my bills. But she was really good and I trusted her and I trusted my ability to hustle. And so I did. I started turning down all new consulting clients. I closed out the accounts I had. And within about a couple months, speaking revenue was up to the level where my consulting was. It was very fast, but it was a matter of making a choice.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think feels most rewarding about this path?
What I love about speaking is that I get a chance, especially with speaking on technology, something that is very emotionally loaded, even though people don't know it. Especially when it comes to baby boomers, people are scared because it's moving so fast. I love seeing that aha moment on people's faces. When I'm on the stage and I'm trying to communicate something and you see people get it and you see them think, I'm going to be okay. I get this. I'm smart. I can do this. That is what gives me my high. Just knowing, I don't care if the audience thinks I'm smart. I need to walk away with them feeling like they're smart.
That's brilliant. I love that. What do you think about in terms of engaging with the audience? What tools and tips have you learned along the way in your own path that have helped you to be successful? Because social media is all about connection and relationship building, and so is speaking, but it's a little bit different.
Well, in terms of communicating with the audience, I mean, for me, the first thing is I'm just very authentic. And so I don't sound rehearsed. And that's not me downing anyone else that does. But my speaking style is conversational because I want to be relational in how I communicate. So that works for me very well. Also, I believe in sometimes creating a little bit of chaos in the room. So I'm that person that will have a keynote with a few hundred people in the room and say, all right, I'm going to give you this task to do. You have 5 minutes. The only rule is you can't leave the property. And you just see people disperse, you know, people are like, oh, what's happening? And then they come back and they're loading up all these pictures using the hashtag and all this fun stuff is happening. And then it gets them reloaded. I mean, I've had lawyers and bankers fight each other with swords over social networks on guard. So, you know, the way I communicate is I'm very down to earth. I make it fun and silly and practical. I don't teach anything or show anything that isn't going to make the audience more efficient, effective, or connected. And oftentimes, I'm the first technology strategist they've ever heard that'll tell them that there's certain popular social networks or technology that I don't believe that particular audience needs to use. And that doesn't mean anyone shouldn't use it. But for instance, the stuff I say to someone in retail is very different than what I say to financial advisors.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so FAs, I'm like, you don't get off Pinterest. There's no point. Go away. Don't do that. Doesn't make sense.
I think that's important in knowing what lane to stay in, not only in social media, but also in your own genius. Looking back at your own path, what have you found helps you to stay relevant and stay on top of things in this ever-changing industry?
I think the main thing is that I lack patience. I was born without patience and something I work on, but that's also helped me because my lack of patience means I get bored very easily listening to other speakers oftentimes, right? And so I hold myself to the same standard. And so if something seems like it's boring, I'm like, I got to spice this up. Or sometimes, honestly, in my presentations, I get tired of saying the same thing so many times. So I'm like, let's mix it up. Even though the client's like, I saw you at this event. I need you to give this exact same talk. I got you. I'm going to give you about 80% of it, but I have to change part of this up for my own mental health. And as a result, it keeps things fresh. So it's my nuttiness that I think helps keep me relevant.
It's a very endearing nuttiness, though, because like you said, it is very authentic and very real and very grounded. Mm-hmm. Switching it up, like as a woman in the speaking industry, what have you noticed, maybe obstacles that you face that your male counterparts didn't necessarily have to deal with quite as much?
You know what's so funny? And this is something that it just dawned on me maybe a few months ago, as crazy as this sounds. I am obviously, anybody that's looking at me, I'm Black and I'm a woman. But unlike when I was in corporate, I am less aware of this fact. I mean, I'm aware in the sense that I'm often the only Black person and oftentimes the only woman in a room as the speaker. But in terms of my business, I don't think it's had a very negative impact on me. I don't feel like I've had to jump a lot of hurdles because I'm a really good negotiator. So at the end of the day, when it comes to speaking, it's like being an entertainer because we are partial entertainers, right?
Yes.
And so what I find is if you bring the value and they need what you have to offer and you're a good negotiator, I know for a fact there have been many times where I've gotten paid more than my male counterparts because I come out of corporate and I know how to negotiate and I'm not going to accept less than my worth. Also, I've had a lot of people that were really kind along the way in telling me to up my fees at certain points. I mean, I remember having a client once, wonderful man who said, Crystal, we're going to hire you again. And when we do, I'm going to need you to up your fee by at least 50% across the board because you're worth it. And I was like, okay. You know, I had a bureau partner that one time was like they did the exact same thing. They were like, I need you to up it to this amount. And I was like, what? And then they were just like, look, trust me, I can sell you at this. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe you can, but I believe in rate parity. So I have to charge my other clients the same thing. But she sold it so hard. I believed her. And I upped my fees, and sure enough, my clients followed right along. It wasn't a problem. So I think the fact that I'm less aware of that and more aware of my skill set, and that I offer something in terms of translating technology that other speakers don't. I'm one of the only tech speakers that you can hire, bring to your event, and I'm not going to talk in tech jargon. So knowing that, good luck finding a man or someone else of another culture, race, or whatever that can do it.
I think that's absolutely true. And I think it's one of the, I don't know if I ever told you this, I worked in entertainment before I worked with speakers. And I completely agree, because we would have, Kenny Loggins booked at a venue that was, the demographic of that area was primarily Mexican-American and African-American. And we couldn't sell tickets for this guy whose entire set was #1 hits, so I think it also comes into play with like knowing your genius, knowing what you can bring. And like you said, negotiation comes into it so much in this area.
I will say with negotiation, the one thing I do want to point out is there are going to be times where people might not know that you're a good negotiator in the beginning. So I have had specifically men, and it's usually Caucasian men for whatever reason, that are older. So we're looking at baby, so I'm getting very specific. The only times I've had that happen where someone has really tried to kind of run over me, it's been that demographic. Not that most of that demographic has, that's not the case. But you just have to know how to hold your own. And I've had, people where I've said, okay, so first off, I need you to get your tone down. This is the value. This is what I'm bringing. Because sometimes people even try to like yell, and it's just it's an intimidation tactic. And I'm like, first off, we're not doing that. Secondly, I choose what business I'm going to take. So if we're going to make this go any further, let's get on the same page. And it's amazing how quickly people will shift their tone when they realize they don't have a position in power over you, and that you're willing to walk away.
I think that comes down to it. I forget what book I read. Maybe it was Knowing Your Value by Mika Brzezinski or something like that. And she tried to come at a negotiation like a man would, very like, and it just backfired because it wasn't based in value. It was just trying to copy what the men do. And I think as women, we have to find our own path of strength in these types of things.
Well, and again, I think the one thing that many people, so let's get outside of even women, miss in negotiations is you cannot show up to the table and not be willing to walk away. And this is true in business and life, relationships, anything. As long as the other person knows that you are unwilling to walk away, you've already lost. So even if it's a good piece of business, even if it's a lot of money, there has to be a point where you say, if these things don't happen, I have to leave the table. And that's going to give you a position of strength.
Good. Brilliant. I completely agree. And looking at the big picture of your business to, where you came from, where you've built it to now, what do you think you want to do next? You've got 2 books out. I don't know if you want to tell us a bit about each of them.
Well, the first one is called The Social Media Why. And that one's just a busy professional's guide to using the major social networks. And it's a very short read. All my books are short intentionally because I want people to be able to read it on a flight. And so if you're like, I don't know how to use LinkedIn or Facebook or blah, 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 why do I need to use it really? Very succinctly, it will explain to you very practical ways you use it to build a business or to build your career. And then One Tech Action, which I just happen to have right here. This one is actually wider than just social media. This talks about using these devices that we are all tethered to. I just gave a talk yesterday about how we're becoming cyborgs due to this, like literal definition of cyborgs. So this book really helps people if they want to figure out how to use technology to connect with friends and family, find a job, build better business connections, plan and enjoy free time. So it's just really how do we make use of all this stuff and stop wasting time? So those are the main things. I would say that, in the future, I don't know if my business is going to change very much because I love what I do. I do have a workshop that I do for beginner speakers. I did the first one in January. The second one's coming up in June. And actually, ironically, this wasn't planned. I even have a copy of the workbook for that one.
Oh, brilliant.
And that's kind of a cool project because I get to show people my systems, because that's honestly how I built my business, Melanie. I think I'm talented and the topic is great and everything, but coming out of corporate, I understand systems. And so I built really great financial systems, things for keeping track of all of my engagements, for prospecting, all of these different, if you see the back end of my business, it's pretty amazing. And then I have assistants that plug into different pieces. So that's something that I'm doing. But other than that, continue to speak. And then really doing more projects where companies are able to license my information to continue the learning process after I leave the stage.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And you've talked a bit about a couple of mentors who were influential in helping to get you started. What do you feel the role of mentorship has in this industry in particular?
Oh, it's invaluable. I mean, there's no way around it. Like you need a mentor, because it's not like many other businesses. You can go out and find business books and kind of navigate how to do. Speaking business is totally, totally different. And very few aspiring speakers understand the business of speaking. They think it's getting your face on marketing materials and being in the light. And I try to explain to people, you know, personally, I don't care about any of that. My face doesn't need to be on anything. I need the client to be happy. I need the audience to learn something. And I need the checks to clear. That's what matters, not where your face is. And so when you have good mentors, they show you how to set up the back end, how to get your financials in order, because it's very tricky with speaking. And if you're going and speaking in different states or countries, you could end up on the wrong side of the law very easily if you don't know what you're doing. So mentors are phenomenal. And I suggest anyone who's interested in learning the business of speaking, the number one resource for that is the National Speakers Association. There's no other association that teaches the business of speaking like they do.
Completely agree. And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe if you're a member of NSA, you also get a listing on eSpeakers, right? Like a basic listing?
You do. And for anyone that, I don't know if anyone doesn't know, but eSpeakers is like the number one resource that many planners use to find speakers if they're not going through a bureau or something else. And even some bureaus use eSpeakers. So yeah, it's a National Speakers Association. There's no way I'd be where I'm at in my career without them, and then many of the mentors that I found through them. Karen McCullough, the person who said, I'm gonna turn you into a speaker, was a member, and she was the person who said, okay, so step 2, I need you to join this.
One of the analogies I use, because everybody knows entertainment, even though they don't know speaking, and having come from one industry to the next, they're actually frighteningly similar.
Okay.
You've heard of the Internet Movie Database, or imdb.com, right?
Yes, yes.
That's the movie version and TV version of eSpeakers. It's like the same thing.
I never thought of it that way, but that is swift. Thank you for that. Okay, I see that.
Yeah. And if people set up their profile right, it can be a lot like an IMDb profile, where you show what you've done in the past, as well as what you're capable of doing. Your bios there, your pictures there, things like that. And a lot of people, like you said, they get started in completely this sideways direction of, I can't tell you how many people I've met who are like, I want to do a TED Talk. I'm like, you know, you don't get paid, right?
And so what's interesting is the conference that I spoke at yesterday, Tamsin Webster. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She's an amazing speaker, but she's also a speaker coach. And she did a talk because she is the, I think, executive producer of TEDx Cambridge, and she's been it for years. And she was doing the math, and she was showing that, you know, for all of the TEDx talks that are happening in the world, because they're licensed, if you take that and divide it by the number of slots for TEDx on TED, because TED, because most of them do their own, right? It's like something like 1 in 17,000 or something crazy like that. And then she was like, you know, you realize statistically speaking, there's a better chance of you being injured by a toilet. So the fact of the matter is, doing a TEDx, not only are you doing it for free, and that's not the bad part. The bad part is 9 times out of 10, no one's going to see it, and you're not going to get bookings from it. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, you have the video there and it leads credibility, just like doing the news. I've done a lot of news segments, but you don't get booked from doing the news. I've done the Harry show. You don't get bookings from doing the Harry show. It's just kind of nice to have that add to credibility.
Yeah, it's markers of prestige.
Yes, but it's not going to get you money.
What are some of the things that you found challenging at the beginning of transitioning to professional speaking?
The beginning was saying no and understanding who to say no to. Because what was happening is, I'll tell you, my challenge really was not getting corporate or association speaking engagements. It was dealing with, a lot of times, groups that were women's groups and minority groups. Because what happens is they see you and they're like, oh, you're one of us. We want to give you exposure. And the people in the audience were not in a position to hire me. And I always think in terms of systems. So it's one thing if you actually have planners or directors of sales in the audience or something like that, directors of HR. But if it's just random, even C-suite people from hotels, it's still not, or different companies, you're still not going to get hired. So in the beginning, it was really getting comfortable with saying no to my people, women and minorities, because those were the ones that were trying to take advantage of me, and setting a standard too, and saying, you know what, we have to value us because I see that you're coming up with money for the men or for the non-people of color. So you're going to pay me just as much, if not more, or I can't do this. Mm-hmm. That was a big one. I think also just getting comfortable saying no to what seemed like a large amount of money. So if you start off with a fee of, let's say, $1,500 in the beginning, and you're trying to get your fee to $3,000, you have to start saying no to some of those $1,500. And in the beginning, that still seems like a lot of money for an hour because you don't understand how it works. But, you know, I remember a few times, I remember at one point saying no to a client, and I think they had a budget of $3,000, and my husband was walking by behind me, and he was listening to this conversation. I hang up the phone. He said, "Did you just say no to $3,000 for an hour talk?" And I said, "I did." And he was like, and he's an ex-banker, by the way, and he's just like, and I said, trust me, I know what I'm doing. It's going to get my fee up. And he was like, "I trust you," and just kept walking. That's what you have to do. And it works. But you have to say no to what you don't want for the universe to start sending you what you do want. And you're going to be tested.
All the time.
As soon as you say you want to up your rate, you're going to get flooded with things at your current rate. And if you don't say no, you're not going to, it's funny how it works. So you have to turn away a lot of money.
What were the markers or signs that you would notice in your business that it was time to increase your rate?
Well, you know, when things like clients would say you need to increase your rate, because that happened twice, actually, 2 different clients that were like, "Yeah, I need you to, you know, charge more." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And again, these were wonderful, successful men. Interestingly enough, they were both kind of in high level financial services kind of areas. So it was cool. I thought I'm very, and actually not that it really matters, but now that I think about it, they're both Caucasian men too. So I thought it was just very generous of them to say, "Look, let me tell you something. We can pay you more and you should be charging." That, and then, you know, things like a bureau saying, "Hey, I need you to charge more," and writing books. When you write books, you kind of elevate your rate based on that. And then more exposure. I've been on television shows and stuff all over the world. So you start to look and then when you start to look at your competition and see what they're charging, you're like, well, I actually have the same accolades as them. I should probably be closer, if not higher, because I'm not a Walmart. I don't believe in doing the whole price competition thing. I'm about value, so I like to be Target.
I love it. Love it. Looking at like the trajectory of everything that you've been through and all of the things that you've accomplished, what do you feel most proud of?
In terms of personal accomplishments, now, okay, I've had 2 moments. One is outward focused and one is inward. Outward was I was doing a presentation for high level women in the financial services industry. So these are women that were in the game before women were in there. These are some tough ladies, okay? They've been through it. And at the end of the presentations, one of them came up to me and she was crying. And she said, "Oh my gosh." She said, "You gave us so many great business tools. That's great." She said, "But just the efficiency stuff for the home, because I always feel like I'm neglecting stuff. And now I can feel like I'm cooking home cooked meals, or I'm doing this or that, or getting this done. And I don't have to feel guilty anymore." And that hit me. And that was actually a catalyst for my last book. Like that interaction, I was like, oh. Professionally, definitely when I got my CSP, that was huge. And for anyone that doesn't know, that's your certification as a professional speaker. And that's something that your peers, it's peer reviewed. So, you know, your clients, it takes over 20 clients filling out forms for you to get it. You have to send out all your financials and stuff for 5 years. And then your peers review your video and decide if you are worthy. So the fact that my own peers said, no, you belong in this upper level. And really only about 12% of National Speakers Association members have it. And it's estimated about maybe 2% of speakers worldwide. Mm-hmm. So that was a pretty cool moment.
That is really cool. And I've told there's some programs out there training speakers and things like that offer a certification. And I've told anybody that I've ever worked with, I'm like, don't even waste your time. CSP is the only thing that really matters in the eyes of the industry because it's the one you can't fake.
Right.
It's not paper.
Right. No. And again, they're reviewing videos and everything. And I personally know some really good speakers that were rejected. So, I mean, it's, you know, it's competitive.
Yeah. That's a real marker of prestige. You mentioned your husband earlier, and how have you balanced the family life with the, kind of road warrior life of a speaker in your own family?
Yeah, well, the cool thing is there's a few things, if I can be very, very honest. One, now my husband has his own company, and he's a professional international photographer. So he travels too, but not nearly as much as I do. But he's very, very supportive. He's always been amazingly supportive. I'm the one who's more likely to feel guilty. I'm like, I haven't seen you in a week. And he's like, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're doing a great job. We got FaceTime, and sometimes he'll fly and meet me different places. Very supportive. I don't know how speakers could do this if they did not have a supportive mate or were single. So I'm not saying you have to have a mate, but if you had someone that wasn't supportive, I don't see how it's possible. I honestly don't see how people do it with children. I'm not saying that they don't. I have friends that do, but I don't have children. And the thought, I have a nephew I'm very close to, and if I don't see him within, about 6 days, like my heart starts to hurt. I have to come into town and see him. So, I don't have pets. I don't have to worry about boarding anything. So I think the more attachments you have, the harder it is, depending on the type of speaker you want to be. If you want to do trainings and you're in town, that's one thing. That's not a problem. But if you want to do keynotes and travel around the world, you have to ask yourself if you're willing to be away from the people that you love, a good amount of time. And for me, while I'm very successful, luckily, and grateful, there's a cap for me. There's speakers that are on the road 200 plus days a year. That is not my goal. That's never been my goal. I actually have something I cap myself at, and my goal is to always just make more money per event versus every year add on more events.
That's a smart way to approach it, I think, because otherwise you just get too homesick and yeah.
Your body, I'm a very healthy eater, and I'm very big into self-care. I got a massage at the airport yesterday. I'm queen of airport massages. Some airports actually have masseuses that know me by name at this point. So when I show up, they're like, oh, Crystal, you're in town. Getting on off these planes and sleeping on all these beds, it'll jack up your back. So I have a chiropractor I see once a month. So all of these things come together, and there are a lot of successful speakers who are not successful socially or in bad health. Mm-hmm. And so I think you start planning from the beginning with the kind of long-term outcome you want in a holistic way, and that'll be helpful.
I think that's brilliant too. And then another kind of random aside question, but it comes up with a lot of people I talk to. Do you consider yourself more extroverted or introverted?
Oh, I'm definitely an introvert. I turn this off and on. Anyone that knows me knows I am most comfortable quiet in a corner reading a book. I am a hermit. I hide from people. I'm that person that, people, I get invited to so much stuff, and most of it I'm like, I'm so sorry, I'm not going to make it. And I don't lie. It just is a general rule of thumb. If you ask me why, I'll say, I need to rest, or I don't feel like coming. It's not, but no, I am not social, but I love helping people. And that's where I can turn this off and on. Once we get off of here, I'm going to be back in here. I'm probably going to go read a book somewhere in the corner. But I've always had the ability to turn it off and on. It's intentional.
Mm-hmm. My personal take, I'm an introvert too. And working in the bureau when I did, what I noticed was most of the really good or great speakers that I found were introverts, which is counterintuitive to what most people assume. Mm-hmm. And there comes an additional level of self-care with that when you need that time to recharge. You've talked about a few of them. Are there any others that you would want to share for the fellow introverts out there who are like, I want to do it, but I don't like people,
Sure, I am putting my therapist's whole family through school. Let me share that. I go every single month. Sometimes I have to phone a friend, phone in, and have phone appointments. So no, because the thing is that as you're talking to people are trying to attach themselves to you. And sometimes people want to be your new best friend. And so you have to be very good with boundaries. As a woman, not that this can't happen to a man too, it certainly can. Sometimes people try to be inappropriate. And so I'm very good at establishing boundaries. I'm quick to say, no, thank you. No, I'm not going out to dinner. No, I'm not giving you my cell phone number, man, woman, or whatever. I'm very good at that. And so I think that's part of the self-care equation as well. All of that is really important.
Fantastic. I don't want to keep you too long today, but I would love to ask if you have any last words of parting wisdom for somebody, who's where you were many, many years ago, just at the beginning of getting started. What would you share from your journey, like the one nugget of wisdom that they would?
Oh, there's so much. I would say get a really good mentor. If I could just give one nugget, I guess that would have to be the one. And by mentor, I mean someone who is doing exactly what you want to do. There's a lot of people out there that project success as speakers, but are broke. And I had to learn that in the beginning. It was very hard for me because I took people at face value. But I learned that there's a very small percentage of us that are actually, making a really good living with it. And so you kind of have to watch, make sure they're not spending their spouse's money or, inheritance money, and look for people that are on the path you want to be on, and then ask them for mentorship. And NSA is just a great place to find potential mentors because the people are so giving. And it's the only industry I've ever seen where I have competitors right now I can call up and say, hey, I'm having a hard time with this presentation. How do I explain this piece? And they'll just give you information. So we do this for each other. So mentorship is number one.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing. You've shared so many great just bits of wisdom throughout it. And I appreciate that you were willing to join today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melanie. I appreciate you for having me.
Of course. How could I not? You're fantastic.
Aww.
So thank you everybody for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.